Top of the morning to you, lads and lasses. We'll be talking about more of the industrialization of the United States after the Civil War today in Chapter 3. And specifically what we're going to be talking about here as we're watching all of this is what is it that allows us to become an industrialized society after the Civil War? And we talked yesterday about several different things, if you remember, right? We talked about natural resources. We talked about a whole variety of things like things that would make our country great. New inventions and other things like a large workforce and our ability to have laissez-faire economics, and all of these things would allow our economy to become one of the greatest that you'd seen in the whole world, right? And today we're going to continue with a discussion of one of the most important things that we've ever seen. And that most important thing is going to be the railroad, and railroads are going to really spur growth across America, and it's important to understand that railroads provide you with a whole variety of important things that allow us to really get a chance to grow as a country and as an economy. All of this really begins, if you think about it, right around 1861, and that's when President Lincoln is going to be out there in Washington, D.C. over here. Of course, during the Civil War, when you have the South over here and you've got the North fighting each other in the Civil War. But one of the things that President Lincoln's going to do is sign the Transcontinental Railroad Bill. And I just can't get that up anymore. And it's going to call for the building of a railroad across America. Whoop! Because what Lincoln wants to see is America expand. At the time of the Civil War, America was more or less this area here within the green. And that's it, right? And really, the area here in the green that was most highly populated and most densely industrialized was right here on the East Coast. I mean, yes, Americans had expanded beyond the Appalachian Mountains here into Illinois and Indiana and Louisiana and Texas, but for the most part, beyond this line, beyond St. Louis, Missouri, beyond even a lot of places in Iowa, which I just circled and which I'm holding my pointer at right here, beyond these places with St. Louis and Iowa and even Minnesota, America was very much still kind of a wasteland. And Lincoln wanted that to grow. So Lincoln's going to sign that Transcontinental Railroad Bill in 1861, and you're going to see railroads begin to spend tremendous amounts of money on materials to expand across the country. And we have so many railroads emerging at this time that you end up with what's called an integrated rail system. And this integrated rail system that we'll see across America, it happens when railroads spread not just up here in the industrialized north or even in the south, which sees railroad growth, but that railroads will begin to spread into the west across regions which Americans will soon be settling across Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas and into Montana and up even into Oregon and Washington and California and through Arizona and New Mexico. These integrated railroads are one of the most important things that Americans will ever see develop in their economy because of a couple things that happen. Number one, you're going to see the price of goods drop as the cost of shipping drops because, quite frankly, the more railroads you have in your country, the easier it is to get your goods to market from, I don't know, say some farm or ranch out here in Kansas to a farm market here in Pennsylvania or Illinois or Indiana. And that ease of getting goods to market is going to cut the cost of shipping. And as the cost of shipping drops, then the cost of goods will drop. The other thing that I want to pay attention to here, or that I want to draw your attention to, is that railroads also increase the size of markets, because now you are not simply limited, right, to growing and selling your crops here just in this little area of Pennsylvania, but you can grow and sell and produce goods in Pennsylvania, but you can sell them in Colorado and Nevada and Idaho. You're able to really expand the market for your goods. And what we're talking about here, of course, is a market is a place to sell. Okay, and that's important to understand. A market is a place to sell your goods. Ultimately, we have America now a truly large nation across a gigantic continent. You've got to find ways to help America stay on schedule and help America stay safe. And we're going to do an activity on this tomorrow that deals with time zones. This region in America where you have a standard set time. And we'll take a look at why that's important as we're going through this. But so far, big deals as to why railroads are super important. You're going to have increased efficiency, price of goods drop as cost of shipping drops, size of markets for products increasing across the nation, and the development of time zones. All of this will help us become an industrial superpower. To add into this, into taking a look at how these railroads get built, right? I gave you the overview on that last slide of how railroads are built, how they become integrated across our country. Now I want to expand on that. And we're going to start by taking a look at those actual railroads are built and why they're built in those particular locations. I want to start this conversation by pointing your attention to what I'm going to highlight right here, this idea of a land grant. Because railroads aren't just kind of picked willy-nilly, right? The government has to figure out who's going to control what land. And that's going to be the same whether it's your house in Gettysburg or if it's going to be a town or a state. Or in the case of what we talked about in 1861 with the Transcontinental Railroad, it's going to be where are you going to put this land, right? Now here's the Transcontinental Railroad, the Central Pacific building right here, the Union Pacific building right here. And really these two railroads are going to say, you know what, let's get the land. They have to petition the government all the way back here in Washington, D.C. They have to petition the government with where they want to build the railroad. You can't just build it wherever you want. So these different companies, they go out there and they say, okay, so where can we do this? Where can we build this? And the government says, all right, we're going to let you build your land or your railroad wherever you see one of these red lines. This is a place that we, as the government in Washington, D.C., have set aside land for you to build a railroad. And if you want to build, you can build right along this red area that we're having you work with, as you see right here. Now, what you actually see is that's land that's actually reserved for the railroads, but now this is approximate. In the darker, or I guess I want to even call it the lighter shade of beige that you can see kind of surrounding each of these railroads, that's the amount of land that was actually given to the railroads. So in a state like Iowa, for example, huge, almost the entire amount of the state was given to railroads. Railroad companies owned almost the entire state of Iowa, as an example, where huge, huge areas of America in the north owned by railroad companies. They own all that land. Now, you only put a railroad on a teeny tiny little part of that, right? Railroads aren't that wide. So why were we giving all of this land to these railroads? And the answer actually comes from what we're going to do with that land in order to build the railroad, because it costs a vast amount of money to build a railroad. So you have to come up with a way to do that. And the answer is, once the company gets that land from the federal government, right? Land grant, once you get that land from the federal government, then your job is to sell that land. And by selling that land to all different kinds of people, right? You might sell that land to farmers to grow crops. You might sell that land to cattle ranchers. You might sell that land to factory owners. But by selling that land, what you're doing is essentially telling those people you will have access to a railroad. And by buying that land, you, as the farmer or the rancher or the factory owner, get access to the railroad to sell your goods across America. So why might I buy land from one of these different companies building a railroad? Because if I'm out here in Missouri, right, or if I'm down here in Arkansas, and I buy land from that railroad, well, now I can ship my goods all over the country, expanded markets. Now I can make more of a profit. So it becomes more attractive to me to own land close to the railroad. This brings railroads incredible amounts of money. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars in today's status go to people that become incredibly wealthy by selling these land grants. People like Cornelius Vanderbilt, this guy that I'm highlighting here in green, they become ridiculously wealthy, and they use that, yes, to buy railroads and to build railroads and to generate industry in the economy, but they also become incredibly wealthy at other people's expense because they don't, Cornelius Vanderbilt doesn't go out and build the railroads all on his own, right? Other people do that for them, and those people often aren't paid a lot of money. Here's a cartoon from the time that shows you what this looks like. You end up with a few very wealthy people at the top, here highlighted, and you can see their names: Cornelius Vanderbilt, Jay Gould, with their millions of dollars. And that fortune is made on the backs, literally, on the backs of the working person. And it's all of the material needed to build those railroads, like lumber, like linens and cloth for the work people to actually use, or iron to build the actual railroads, or paper supplies, or shoes, all of these things that workers need. But what you end up with then are a few people becoming ridiculously wealthy, and these workers making, down below, not much at all, barely making any money. In fact, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to see how people at the time who were making these products, who were building these railroads, working for these very, very wealthy men, were in some cases making $1 a week or less than $1 a week. So these very, very wealthy entrepreneurs, these people that gamble and risk money, entrepreneurs, are often called robber barons, because they take all this money, all this wealth, and they don't give the average person a lot of it in salary, meaning that the average person stays. Landowners that were not robber barons, there were some that were very much legitimate business owners who helped a lot of people increase their wealth as Americans. One of those would be James Hill. He built the Great Northern Railroad with no land grants whatsoever. He negotiated deals with landowners and farmers and towns and cities, and he built this very large railroad. You can see it up here highlighted in brown. He built this very large railroad, and he did it without taking advantage of average people. In fact, he said to anyone that was willing to come settle out west along his railroad that he would actually give people discounts to use his railroad if they were willing to settle along northern America. His method of doing this was very simple. How could he afford to profit this? He would take goods from the eastern part of America. He would ship them out to the west coast of America. He would then ship them over to Asia, China in particular, and then he would ship back very valuable goods from Asia that Americans couldn't get access to, and then ship them back east on his railroad and sell them for a great profit. This was just one way many business owners who were not robber barons at this time, but there were many who were, leading to a large number of poor Americans. Now, tomorrow we're going to take a look at a lot of this stuff in more detail, but for now, I think we've got a really good feel as to why railroads were important to Americans.